All right, hi everybody. I'm April, the Communications and Operations Coordinator for the Washington State Budget and Policy Center, and I'll go ahead and let everyone else introduce themselves around the room.
I'm Nisha Werschko, Executive Director.
Hi, Jennifer Tran, Associate Director.
Hey, Liz Olson, Policy Fellow.
Kelly Smith, Senior Policy Analyst.
Andy Nicholas, Associate Director.
And I'm Julie Watts, Deputy Director.
All right, thank you for joining us today for the Facebook Live, and we're going to be chatting just about session. It's over, got a lot to talk about. And before we start, just wanted to recap what our legislative agenda looks like as we started the year. This year we decided to focus on 5 key priorities and just use that to focus our work. The Working Families Tax Credit and helping with funding on the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families and Housing and Essential Needs program. Building a child savings account program, expanding access to the Working Connections Childcare and Early Childhood Education and Assistance program, and of course, closing the tax loophole on capital gains. And before we get too far going, we want to say that we're going to try to keep it short, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them early, and we'll pause to take a moment to answer those questions. Otherwise, we'll just continue. So what's something that from the session that you guys are celebrating this year?
Well, I'm celebrating the passage of House Bill 1603, which takes a step to reinvest in Work First, or our state's Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. And I'm excited about this because Work First is really a lifeline for families who are facing crises like deep poverty or experiencing homelessness, surviving domestic violence. And so we need that program to be strong so that folks can get their needs met.
I'm celebrating the state investment in the upcoming 2020 census. We put $15 million in the budget for community outreach to make sure that we're going to have strong participation across the state. And that's going to be really important. It means that we're going to get our fair share of political representation and federal funding for things like schools and roads and hospitals. And so it's a good investment.
I'm celebrating the new progressive sources of revenue that were enacted this year, particularly business surtaxes on large banks and making our state real estate excise tax a more progressive and equitable source of funding. And I'm also celebrating our role in pointing out some really big problems with the proposed big tax break for sort of unscrupulous out-of-state vulture capitalist firms. And we played a good role in educating lawmakers and advocates about why that was not a good idea, and the bill did not wind up moving forward. So that was good.
Let us know we can't always get what we want, so it's something that we're continuing to work on this year.
Well, we'll be continuing to work on the Working Families Tax Credit. We were able to build a really strong coalition. We were able to have several really good hearings. We got some really great legislative champions. Weren't quite able to push it all the way across the finish line, but really proud of the work that we did. But this is going to be really important for them to work on next year. I mean, this is a critical first step in rebalancing our tax code for low and moderate income working families and really helping people make ends meet. So we'll be back day one pushing for that.
And a great way to fund the Working Families Tax Credit would be through a state capital gains tax. Those of you that have followed the organization for a while know we've been strong proponents of capital gains as an equitable source of new resources for all priorities, including the Working Families Tax Credit. And we came into session with pretty high hopes that we would be able to get it across the finish line this year. Didn't quite make it by the end of session, but we did a good job of really continuing to advance the proposal, building support among lawmakers and advocates for it. And so we feel really well poised going into 2020 that could be one of the first things that lawmakers take up and pass.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that we're celebrating the passage of 1603, which is a really exciting and important policy development, but lawmakers really have some unfinished business when it comes to Work First. That program has suffered a series of really harmful program cuts throughout the last decade, and we have work to do as far as sort of undoing some of those policy decisions like harsh and inflexible time limits that really negatively affect families and particularly folks of color in our state.
Mm-hmm. We also still have work to do on passing a proposal for a statewide child savings account program. We had a really good proposal this year that would have created a statewide program and would have benefited kindergartners across the state. But from what we know in the research, that could have been a powerful way to advance equity and opportunity in our state. So there's still more to do there.
Was there something about session that surprised you?
Well, I say that I was surprised they ended on time. So, I was in Olympia on Friday before the end of session and didn't seem like it was possible to get everything done that needed to get done. And legislators ended up working through the night, multiple nights in a row, and it ended by the deadline of midnight on Sunday night at the end of April. So, that was one thing. And then the other thing is just seeing how many legislators were really talking from day one until the final day about balancing the tax code, and really the urgency around reforming our state's tax code is really sinking in with legislators. So that's great.
Yeah, it was great to see the messaging on that too. And kind of going on to the point of whether or the fact that the legislature ended on time, that was a surprise to me too. Having worked around the legislature for several years, there have been many, many special sessions. So what do we think about that? Is that a good or bad thing that they ended on time?
It's 105 days for the long session, and in some ways that's an arbitrary deadline. I think the measure that we should look at is what was accomplished and what does the budget do for communities. And to me, it never really matters that much whether they end on time. It matters what the outcome is, and if it takes an extra couple days or weeks or even months, and that gets to a better outcome, I don't really have a problem.
Is there one lesson that you took away from session that you want to share?
Yeah, for me, this was my first year working at the Budget Policy Center and alongside the Washington State Legislative Session. And I think the biggest thing that I'm taking away is that we as one organization can't do anything on our own. In order to move policy forward, we have to work in coalition. And we have so many amazing partners around the state that worked really hard during session to help us make important changes. So shout out to all of them.
Yeah, we do have a great network of people to work with. If you could change one thing about our legislative process, what would it be?
So I think most Washingtonians, when they're assuming that when lawmakers are coming together to build a budget for the state, that they're looking at their needs of the various communities and then building a budget and the revenue package around that. And that's not really how it works. And so one of the things that I would do is I would have a budget process that is really built primarily on what do communities, what do families, what do we need as a state to actually build a just and prosperous future for everybody, and have that be the starting point for the state budget rather than sort of an arbitrary, this is the size that we are going to limit ourselves to going into session. So I think that is the one thing for me coming out of the session that really reared its head in a negative way throughout the session, was this sense of we are locked down to a particular number, and it's just not true.
Yeah, and one way to find out what our communities need is to hear from them, right? So one of the changes that I would make is for us to find some innovative ways for the public to get more engaged in the legislative process. It's really hard for a lot of people to get down to Olympia to testify or to even write their legislators. So some of our proudest moments with the Working Families Tax Credit Coalition, shout out to those amazing partners again, was to have real people in the communities who would be impacted by these things come down and testify and talk to lawmakers about how these policies would impact their lives and what struggles they're having. So some exciting things that are happening in the legislature, they're working on remote testimony so folks can call in from across the state or video in from across the state to be able to have lawmakers hear from them. And I think building on that and trying to innovate some more ways for the public to get engaged and be heard around these really important policies.
That'd be really cool. And I think one thing that I came into the session with was a lot of energy around how diverse the makeup of our legislature was this year. I was really energized by that, and I was really excited to see just how diverse the group of people is. So what's something about the legislature or about the process that makes you proud?
I think that the new members and the energy they brought and the voice of communities that they brought to the legislative process, and it was different this year. You saw Keep Washington Working Act passed, with strong support, really protecting immigrants and helping protect our economy. You saw the legislature act to pass Initiative 1000, repealing Initiative 200, which had been on the books for decades, and really giving everybody a chance, equal chance at opportunity. So there was a difference. The census funding, Jennifer, that you mentioned, those policies really being prioritized that really help benefit all communities and really advance equity in our communities. So that was really exciting.
So did any questions come in through the live, Julie?
Yeah, we do have one question. So, what are you working on now that the session is over?
So we on the fiscal team are going to do a comprehensive look at our state tax code and how it directly and indirectly impacts systemic racism in our state. How does it contribute to it, and what can we do to actually have a tax code that pushes back against systemic racism? So that's going to be a big chunk of our time.
And this is a great opportunity for us all to be out in community too and learning from partners and talking to folks about the policy proposals. So, we're definitely going to be spending more time all across the state talking to folks about the policy proposals that we have on our agenda right now and what's the next wave of policy items that we can help advance forward and building those strong partnerships that help us accomplish change in the 2020 session and beyond.
Great stuff to look forward to. So if there's no more questions, what you guys can look out for is a full budget analysis that's coming out probably later today. And we also will be sharing details about our annual conference, Budget Matters. If you want to be the first to know about both those things, you can sign up for Schmudget, our email list. And also this year we did something new and different for us. We did these Facebook Live videos instead of doing webinars. And we just want to hear from you guys and see how that went. Were you able to get some questions answered that you had? Are there any other topics that you would like us to cover? Just let us know. You can send us comments either through social media, or you could send us an email at bnpinfo@budgetandpolicy.org. Thanks so much for joining us today. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.